start off with a story about my dear wife. Since she's not here, I can make fun of her. This morning I woke up and she said, "Have you seen this email from my sister?" And I said, "No." She showed me there was a picture, and it had what looked like just a pen. There was about 4 of them sticking out of a cushion. And she said, "Do you know what that is?" I said, "I don't know, it looks like a pen." She said, "No, I can't believe it. You're in the software industry, you work in IT, you should know what that is. And it's in Japan." Okay, I have no idea what it is. So she scrolls down to the next picture, and it shows the pen actually projecting onto a wall. I was like, "Wow, that's kind of cool." She said, "Well, what do you think it is?" I said, "Well, it looks like a projector. That's pretty awesome." She said, "No, I just can't believe you work for SAP and you don't know what that is." I said, "Okay, I seriously have no idea." So you scroll down further, and then what it does is it actually turns into a tripod. It goes at an angle, it projects on the wall, and then it projects down on the desk, and it has a keyboard. And it's literally a PC and a pen that you can kind of take with you. And she's like, "That is the coolest thing I've ever seen." She's like, "That is just awesome. I just can't believe you didn't know better. It was built here in Japan. You should know that." And I said, "Well, yeah, you know, it is kind of cool, but the practical application of that, I'm just finding hard to get, because I don't think I would take that with me into a meeting to go project into a room like this, for example. I don't see myself going to a customer. There's no mouse. It's going to have limited memory, right? And so I just, in my mind, I'm going through, hey, it's kind of cool technology, but the reality is I don't see the practical application of it. And so I began the discussion tonight because what I want to talk about is, I'll talk a little bit about leadership. I'll talk a little bit about the building a strategy, and then how you can actually transform a business. So I thought about what are the things that, if I were in your shoes, what would I want to hear? Going back to my MBA days, I graduated in 1998 from Brigham Young University. No. And in that discussion with myself, I was thinking, you know, what you guys really want to know about is kind of how have you applied what you learned, you know, 10, 12 years ago to your real world job today that you're living. Now, I know all of you have jobs that you get to apply some of that knowledge, but the reality is that 8 or 10 years from now, you'll find that the things that you're learning today, the teamwork that you are experiencing, you'll actually get to employ in a lot different way than what you were ever, you know, probably thinking about when you first started the program. So let me talk a little bit about, I don't know how many of you know Peter Drucker, but Peter Drucker is arguably the most renowned operations guru and educator in the world. He died, but I just thought I'd share with you a few of his kind of pearls of wisdom. He says that on building on people's strengths, to demand only well-rounded people, people who have only strengths and no weaknesses, is to invite mediocrity, of which there's always an abundant supply. There's far too little strength around to waste it. So the reality is, you know, if you surround yourself with a bunch of people who are very strong in certain areas, that's great. But now you just have yourself surrounded by some people who have strengths in some areas, and their ability to expand into other parts of the business that you need to explore are going to be very limited to the areas that they have strength in. So the diversity that you need in your business is actually limited to their particular strengths. The reason that's important is I remember when I first started our program, it was a 2-year program, and the first thing that they did was they handed us the syllabus for the full 2 years. And they said, this is what you're going to learn. And by the way, you have to choose 3 other people, there's 4 people in a group, that you want to study with for the next 2 years. And they explain the Socratic method and how that's used, Harvard business cases that are used, and everything is, of course, is interactive, you know, using the Socratic method. So BYU patterned its MBA program after the Harvard Business School. So what you have to do very quickly is identify really what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and I better go find people and surround myself in my team with the people that I need strengths in. If I'm not strong in accounting, if I'm not strong in finance, if I'm not strong in marketing, I better surround myself with the people that have strengths in the areas that I'm not. It's extremely important, right? So you very quickly, I think all of us to a degree think, oh, I'm pretty strong here, or I'm kind of strong there. Faced with that, knowing how competitive the environment was going to be that I was going to be in for the next 2 years, I wasn't about to lie to myself and say that I have strengths in certain areas that I knew I wasn't. So you have to be very, very clear and understand what your own strengths are. So know your market. This relates to tonight's discussion because I'll talk a little bit about SAP Japan. I'll talk about the Japanese market and how we've transformed the business. But what Peter Drucker said is it turned out that the brash competitor had something else. Its top people had made it a point to spend many months a year away from their own organization in hospitals and doctors' offices and operating rooms. They didn't go there to sell, they went there to observe and to listen. Point is, you better know your market. So using my wife's example this morning, well, the pen is actually really cool to go out and actually try to sell it to people who can use it and apply it in their daily lives. It's going to be limited to a very select audience, I think. Control your time. This is really good. So he says, yet it's also my observation that effective executives do have in common certain practices or habits, and practices can be learned. One obvious practice is the conservation of time. In a peculiar way, the executive's time is everybody else's time but his own. He cannot shut himself off from these demands, but he must use the little time he can control to do the important things. So I remember the very last lecture that I had in our program was from a professor who said, you guys have just spent the last 2 years with every waking moment, 24 hours a day practically, absorbing all of this knowledge. And you've had to do significant time management for yourself. And at the end of the program, what you're going to find is you're going to have a ton of extra time because you've just been so rigid in where you spend your time. Every moment, it seems like something is scheduled for you. And at the end of the program, you'll find that you have a number of extra hours in a day. And unless you actually schedule yourself to do something else, whether it be a hobby or a new profession or whatever it is that you want to do, you're actually going to limit that amount of extra time that you have. You'll just blow it. You'll find that you'll go off and spend time reading or doing whatever. Again, just depends on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. But my suggestion is, at the end of the program, think about how you're going to spend your time. And finally, what he says is pull the weeds. The problem is to get rid of yesterday's successes that have outlived their potential. The effective executive periodically asks, if we were not already doing this, would we go into it now? Unless the answer is an unconditional yes, the chances are the activity should be dropped or sharply curtailed. The reality is that businesses have to transform themselves. They have to reinvent themselves all the time. And if you don't transform and reinvent yourself and innovate as a company, you'll die. There's lessons and companies that are, scattered around the world where they just didn't innovate. They just let their competition actually out-innovate them, and they died. So, change. When the winds of change blow hard enough, the most trivial of things can turn into deadly projectiles. So, I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know if any of you have seen the despair.com, but they have a lot of really cool things. So, let me talk about how we drive corporate transformation. What I'll talk about today is a little bit about SAP, our game plan 2010 strategy, understanding the Japanese market, focus on innovative growth strategies, organizational change, and then a summary of where SAP is today. Let me I'll back up just a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So my wife and I have been in Japan for 2 years. We have 3 children, 2 that are twins who just turned 3, and a 4.5-year-old who's just about to turn 5. So a little bit of an active household. We live in Minamiazabu, love it. Hope we get to stay here for a long time. So I've been with SAP now about 5 years. 3 years in the U.S. and then 2 years with Adobe, as was mentioned earlier, and then moved back to Japan to work for SAP. Okay. So a little bit about SAP. Let me continue to talk about innovation. So innovation is no longer the exclusive realm of the research and development lab. Today it's the responsibility of every person, every organization, every business day. This is from our annual report in 2007. So the unique combination of SAP has helped SAP become the world's enterprise software leader with 43,800 employees in more than 50 countries and 46,000 customers. So I'm just going to kind of go through this quickly. SAP has roughly 13,000 large enterprise companies. This is in the 1 billion and up range. Around 33,000 mid-market companies, so between 100 million and a billion US, and 46,000 total companies. About 16 billion US in revenue, with 25 industry solutions, and we spend about $1.5 billion in research and development every year. So here's how SAP engages with our customers. I don't know how many of you know about SAP, or if you know SAP in general, but we're the world's largest enterprise software company. So we sell enterprise software applications that basically run businesses. So we talk a lot about SAP, or companies that are run by SAP. So enterprise resource planning basically is everything that a company uses to run its business. It's human resource applications, financial applications like accounting, customer relationship management, all of the data warehousing, basically everything that you would need to run your business. In addition to that, we have our business applications that are for supply chain networks. So supply chain management, a lot of you may have heard of like I2 or Manugistics, it's similar to that. So supply chain is so that if you have a fairly large group of suppliers and you're a discrete manufacturer like an automobile company, for example, and you use, let's say, several hundred of these suppliers, to manage those suppliers is very difficult, especially if you want to, I don't know if you've explored like just-in-time inventory management or Kanbans, things like that. To manage that whole process is very difficult. So SAP actually has a software that helps you manage all of those internal processes. It also has obviously integration back into the financial applications like your accounting systems, etc., so that you can manage all of your supplier relationships, the acquisition of those parts and discrete manufacturing, and then integrate it into a solution that allows you to relate back to your customers. So all of that customer, partner, and suppliers and corporate information is all kind of integrated into one group of applications. So the way we interface with our customers is basically we have a number of customer needs or requirements that we understand, and we have arguably the world's largest group of industry experts. So we go to market in 25 different industries, which means that we have industry experts around the world that focus exclusively on automotive or chemicals or oil and gas, etc., in each one of those industries. So they come in and provide all the thought leadership. They meet with analysts. They understand the market dynamics in each of the respective industries that they're in. They're really the thought leaders as it relates to that particular industry. They're also the liaison back into Germany where we do our product development. So we do all of our application development in Germany, and then what we do is we actually localize it here, like in Japan or in Korea or in China, etc. So we take those applications, we understand what the local market conditions are, and then we localize them, or we call globalization, back in the respective market. We have best-run businesses, so we have a fairly large group of MBAs around the world, and their job is to understand what the business cases are, what's the value of implementing a solution like SAP. And what they do is they benchmark with a number of companies around the world, so they understand really what that dynamic is within that particular environment. So for example, if I'm an automotive company and I implement SAP Financials, how much value should I expect to get out of the application? Well, if you have a number of other companies that have implemented SAP, you can actually understand the value that those other companies in that industry have gained from implementing SAP. And now what you can do is go out and actually benchmark the company you're trying to sell to against its peer group. So it's extremely important to be able to benchmark against the other best-run businesses. And then what you do is help people understand that by implementing SAP, or any ERP system for that matter, but just by implementing an ERP system, it allows you to gain a lot of business value. Customer value network. So understanding again what those customers are doing along with the industries. We develop the business cases. We have a solution roadmap, meaning if we understand what the industry needs are, we can actually look into the future and see what the trends are and make sure that our product development is actually ahead of the game. From an implementation and organizational plan, so we obviously have to know how to implement the software, what are the best practices in the industry, what are the best practices for the companies that are implementing our solutions, and how do we make sure that we leverage those. Value realization, so once I do this business case, I better go back and make sure that the companies are actually getting the value out of the implementation that we said they would get when we built the business case. So we have a group of people that make sure we manage that. That all leads to customer loyalty. So if I understand what the industry needs are, I benchmark against other companies, I create a value network of customers, I develop a business case, I identify what the solution roadmap is and implementation plans, create value and make sure that I realize it, it leads to customer loyalty. So that's how we build our business. Okay? So here's how SAP goes to market. Basically, as I said, we have a globalization where we identify what the local needs are in each of the respective markets. So while we generate or develop software in Germany, we actually go back and make sure that it's localized in the respective market that we're in, so that when we implement in India or in China, we implement software that's needed for that respective market. So for example, if I have supply chain management solution, we have a product called Advanced Planning and Optimization, APO. So that's where I go out and I do all of my forecasting and planning for the future. If that's not localized for the respective market that it's in, it's going to be, it'll be an application that's actually not used by that company. For example, what the needs are in China are going to be a lot different than what's needed in the US or in India or in Europe, for that matter. So it has to be localized. We go to market, as I said, by industry, but we also have the customer segmentation. So I showed on the first slide, we have our companies that are large enterprise, where we have the companies above $1 billion, and then we have the companies below $1 billion but greater than 100 million. So we segment our customers in that regard. We have industry-specific solutions. So not only do we actually go to market by industry, but we have solutions that are built for that respective industry. So we have an oil and gas solution that has all of the integrated best practices built into the application, so that out of the gate, right out of the box, you have a number of best practices that have already been implemented by other companies, and that gets integrated into our solution. Focus on best run business areas, as I said, the financial excellence, people and talent management, sales and marketing, etc. Here's kind of a who's who of customers that implemented SAP and are running SAP across their business. As I said, we have about 46,000 companies that are running SAP, the vertical expertise, innovation power, and large ecosystem. So we have about almost 4,000 different companies that are in this ecosystem of systems integrators. Those are the companies that implement our software. The independent software vendors, or ISVs, those are companies like Adobe or like other software vendors that we've integrated our solution with. And then you have the top brands that are, according to Business Week, we're number 34 in the top brand. So let me just talk a little bit about what we're doing as a company. So SAP has a product called Enterprise Service-Oriented Architecture. I don't know if you've heard of that before. It's kind of a buzzword that's out there for any of you familiar with it, but it's basically, instead of developing an application that sits on a computer and only works with a specific group of functions, so it only does financials, for example, or it only does CRM or supply chain. What the ESO applications actually do is it's a service-oriented architecture, so it allows you to keep your legacy systems, or if you've had home-built systems that you created a number of years ago that you kind of live with today, it allows you to keep those applications, but implement an SAP solution on top of that. So it allows you to call on what's called services to make sure that you get the functionality that you need with specific applications, but it also allows you to leverage the current systems you have in place. Now, typically what companies want to do is they want to migrate away from their legacy applications onto more of a standard business application. I'll talk a little bit about the Japanese market and how that dynamic is changing, but it is fairly significant in terms of having an application that's robust enough that allows you to use the legacy systems that are out there, but also implement a solution like SAP, so you can have a combination of standard applications along with your legacy systems, plus other third-party applications. So for us, as I said, we have a segmented market, so we have different products for different segments. So if you're a very small company, for example, we have a Business One application. This is for companies that are typically in like 1 to 50 or 1 to 75 employees. So very small companies, but they have pretty significant needs as well, right? And they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. They just have less functionality requirements. In other words, they don't want to implement this full-blown SAP, group of applications. They just need some specific functionality. I can just use Microsoft Office. I don't need to actually go out and have this really rich, robust, group of applications. I'm okay with doing something like that. So Business One, or SAP Business One, allows you to do that. Business by design is really for companies that are in the 50 to about maybe 250 employees. This is done as software as a service, so it's a hosted application from SAP. It allows you to go in and have very rich industry-specific functionality, but you don't actually have to implement it yourself. You just start paying right out of the gate, and based on the number of users that you have, you can utilize it in software as a service. There's limited functionality changes with that, so you can't go out and do a bunch of customization. In fact, you can do some customization, but you're kind of limited to the world that you live in within business by design. So you're not able to go in and do a bunch of integration, you're not able to do a bunch of customization, you're just kind of limited to that world. But for companies between 50 and 250 employees, that's okay. That's all they need. The next is SAP All-in-One. So that's actually configurable and extensible, meaning that now you can actually do some of the customization. So once you've outgrown your business by design, you've outgrown that environment where you can't customize, now you can actually come in and you can customize the applications that are, again, industry specific, but this is in the companies that are the 50, maybe 250 to probably close to 1,000 employees, something like that. So for the most part, you can go the 1 to 50, the 50 to 250, and then the 250 to 1,000 employees, and there's different products for those respective markets. So we don't try to do a one-size-fits-all. We actually have different products that we develop to meet the needs of those respective markets. You can see in 2007, enterprise service-oriented architecture was established, the evolution by design. We've grown from what's called R2 and R3 in 88 and 94 respectively, to beyond ERP in 99, so this is our business suite. So you may recall one of the, I think, best strategies that Microsoft had is they got into the market, and while they had Word and Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook, when they finally developed those products as a suite, it actually changed the dimension of the market that they were selling into. So rather than selling them as independent application, they created a suite of products that changed the whole market. That was back in the mid-80s, actually. So you had companies like WordPerfect, if any of you remember WordPerfect, where it was a really, really good Word application, but they didn't have a spreadsheet. They didn't have an Excel. So what they tried to do is team up with like Borland and Quattro Pro, if you remember those days, and trying to team up with another company to build a suite of applications is very difficult. They didn't have a PowerPoint type of document or application, and they really didn't have an Outlook or an email application. So they tried to team up with Novell and try to use some of that. But again, trying to team up with other companies and build alliances, you don't have an integrated solution. And while Word and Excel, you couldn't compare Excel, for example, to Quattro Pro. You couldn't compare Word to WordPerfect. You couldn't Excel or use PowerPoint. I can't remember there was another presentation application, but each one of those were less than the Microsoft version in terms of functionality and kind of a rich, robust environment, but you didn't get the integrated approach with it either. So I can't take and automatically go from PowerPoint to Excel and embed and do all of the cool things that you need to do. So even though you were limited in functionality, it was okay because I had a suite of products. Well, SAP did the same thing in '99. We created a suite of our ERP solutions to make sure that you have one complete integrated approach to the applications that you need to implement. That changed the world we lived in. So the revenue for SAP in '99 actually started going up pretty dramatically. So you can see this, the top line here is the number of employees. Compounded annual growth over that period of those 10 years is 10%, which, if you go back to almost any industry to get a 10% compounded annual growth rate is pretty significant. We're about 10 billion euro today in terms of revenue, which is about 16 billion US dollars. And then if you look at the operating income, 2.7 billion euro, or about 4.5 billion US dollars in operating income. So pretty significant, sizable company. The software and related services, as I mentioned earlier, we have some of our products now that are more subscription based, so like software as a service. And when you pay for software as a service, you actually combine the license application along with maintenance. And because that's one fee that you're paying for both of those, we had to actually separate the way we look at our financials. So we no longer look at strictly license revenue, we combine it with license and maintenance, and we call it software-related services because it's a subscription. For pure software revenue, which is kind of how we measure the majority of our business, you can see we have 13% and 18% respectively for for our growth in 2007 to get to 3.4 billion operating cash flow and operating margin. Anyway, SAP is a very diverse company. We have 43,800 employees, 30% of them are women. Average age is 37, and average seniority is 5.4 years. So it's a fairly diverse work environment that we have. So let's look at Japan. For Japan, we represent 35% of Asia Pacific Japan, or APJ. So the way we're organized across Asia Pacific Japan is we have 5 primary hubs or countries. There's Japan. If you go down, we have North Asia, which is China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea. So this group here is a second. We have Southeast Asia, which is kind of all of these: Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, etc., Philippines. This whole area is Southeast Asia. You have India as a fourth, and then Australia, New Zealand as the fifth. Those are the 5 primary hubs across Asia Pacific Japan. In Japan itself, we represent 35% of that revenue. Last year, we experienced 30% growth in our license revenue, 21% growth in our total revenue. So if you think about Japan as a market growing at about 2 to 2.5%, we're roughly growing, 10 to 15 times faster than the market. So pretty substantial growth in Japan, especially given the fact that it's a very mature market here. The second largest economy in the world, everybody knows. So let me talk a little bit about Game Plan 2010, unless you have any questions on SAP. I think I covered most everything. Hopefully you have a decent sense of what SAP is. I think, it's funny, someone asked one time, what does SAP really do? Because you guys are like that golf apparel company, right? Because people know Ernie Yells, and he wears the SAP logo. We sponsor him, but I thought that was pretty funny that people thought we were a golf apparel company. We used to have mysap.com, so those of you know, what's his name? Jesper Parnevik, the European, actually Sweden, we used to sponsor him as well. So after talking about SAP, we'll talk a little bit about Game Plan 2010, which is building a strategy, and then I'll talk about the Japanese market and growth strategies. But for us, one of the biggest challenges that I faced when I first got here is, how are we doing? How's SAP doing in the market? I really just don't have a sense of where we're at. And all of the information I had from our marketing intelligence really was misleading to me. So I didn't believe it. I thought, I just can't believe that our market share is that high. And we're going back to the board of SAP and telling them how great we are and how much market share we have, and I just didn't buy it. So what I decided to do is, I was asked by our CEO to build a strategy for the next 3 or 4 years. So build our 2010 strategy. It was actually by the end of 2010. So over that 4-year period, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? How are we going to grow? What changes do we need to make to transform our business? So what I decided to do is actually go back and just forget about the marketing intelligence that I had, forget about everything, set it aside, take the data that's there, and I put together an RFP, and what I wanted to look at is what I would call a situation assessment. Okay, so what I want to do is go out to a third-party company and leverage them. Pretty expensive study, but what I did was I came back and I wanted to look at what's the current market environment. So what's happening in Japan? So again, not as it relates to SAP, but just what are the overall macroeconomic conditions of the market, right? Like I said, Japan's growing at 2.5%, so where's it growing? We have a declining population. What does that mean? What impact is that going to have on our business? So again, without respect to SAP in general, but just thinking about Japan, what's going on in the market? Then what I want to know is, what is our customer buying behavior? So how do our customers acquire our software today? What channels do I sell through? How do I leverage my partners? What is the current way that we interact with our customers? Who are the competitors that we have? Based on the current products that we sell in the markets that we sell into, who are the competitors? And then again, what are the partners that I leverage and how do I leverage them? As I mentioned earlier, we have a large number of different partners. We have the independent software vendors. We have OEMs, where people actually implement or integrate our software with theirs. We have systems integrators, people that implement our software. We have channel partners, those who resell. So we've got a fairly robust partner network, but what does that landscape look like? Again, each one of those is segmented between large enterprise and the small and medium enterprise. And then I put all that together, the macroeconomic conditions, customer buying behavior, competitive landscape, partner landscape, and then I look at SAP's current position. So what's SAP's position in the market? How much market share do I have by segment? How much do I have by industry? Just basically all the detailed analysis that I need. So again, what I found is when I did the RFP, there's really not anybody that can tell me that. So it was really very frustrating because I went out and I did this whole RFP and people came back and said, well, that's great information. I really just don't know, I don't have that information. So there was really nobody that knew the enterprise software market well enough to be able to really give me detailed information to help me assess what the market conditions are for SAP. So what we did was we just fed them as much information as we could. We literally, for about 2.5 months, worked with them every day, and we just went through and gave them everything. We met with them every day, and we just fed them as much information as we could. And then based on a bunch of customer and partner and competitor surveys that they did, we were able to get together a really robust set of knowledge and analytics that was far better than anything I ever thought we could put together. So we actually used that, and once I have my current situation and my kind of situational analysis, once I have a pretty good understanding for where I've been, now what I have to do is actually build a revenue model for where I'm going to grow in the future, right? So if I know what my position is in the market, I know what I've done historically, then where do I need to be in 4 years? So we all know that typically you get a top-down type of approach in your budget, right? So the executive management says we want you to grow at a 30% compounded annual growth rate. Okay, great. So how do I make that work? Because again, I go to market by segment, I go to market by industry, I go to market in a number of different ways through my channels. What's the dynamic of the environment that I'm going to change over the next 4 years in order to see that growth? Because I can build an Excel file that just shows the revenue growth, and that's great, but it doesn't actually help me understand how I'm going to get there. But now what I need to do is I need to build a strategy by each one of those segments. I need a strategy for the large enterprise, one for the small to medium enterprise, the service enhancements, so our implementation, and then key breakout factors like, are there new alliances I need to build? Are there acquisitions I need to make? What is it that I need to do in each of these areas to think about breakout factors? And then I come up with a summary of recommendations. So, seems fairly simple, I guess, as I try to explain it now, but at the end of the day, it was very difficult to pull all this together, especially given the time frame that we were running from. So the company we chose is Roland Berger to do the study. We started on January 8th, and literally in the middle of March, we went down to Singapore and delivered that to our executive team, the senior executive team in Singapore. The reason that's important is because what happened is people across Asia Pacific and certainly in Europe and America, they just don't understand Japan. And for them to understand Japan, we needed to go out and just disseminate as much information as quickly as possible. And what we found is the best way to do that is to take this study that we had done, our 2010 game plan, and just go down and spend 2 days and share it with them. And so what we did was we identified about 12 or 14 major areas that we had questions in terms of how we were going to grow the business. So we had issues around field services, around some segments, around products that we had, some localization. We got some really key areas that we needed to address. We took it down, and we literally had brainstorming sessions. We took and did breakout sessions with the key management down there, really helped them understand the market in general, so gave them all the information on the survey that we did, the whole strategy. Once we shared all that information with them, then we did these breakout sessions again for 2 days, and now all of a sudden we had a really good understanding from them of what our challenges are, what our weaknesses are, and we could all brainstorm some ideas on how we could actually build a business together. To me, I thought we were just going down because it was an exercise that we had to do for our CEO of Asia Pacific. The reality is it actually helped them get a really good and solid understanding of what's going on in Japan and the challenges that we face here in a much different way than what any of us ever anticipated. So there was huge value add. Then we presented back to our CEO of SAP globally. That actually, fortunately or unfortunately, led to me taking on a new position in the region to build a strategy for all of Asia Pacific. So I actually had to replicate this model for each of the countries, and I went down and worked for the CEO, and I literally just built strategies across each of the different markets across Asia Pacific. So for me personally, it was a great experience, but it was challenging to fly 10,000 miles a week, as you could probably attest. It was fairly difficult in those days to kind of manage my life. So let me talk a little bit about some of the key findings that we had from our 2010 game plan. For us, as I said, there's the software and maintenance, or the software services. There's custom application market, and then we have core apps and platform. So if you look at this, you have 3.2% compounded annual growth versus 7.5% in the regular software in the package space. But if you look at the size of the market, 446 million JPY or billion JPY versus 221. About 2/3 of the market is custom application, and 1/3 of the market is packaged apps. So what? Well, what that means is the addressable market that I have as SAP Japan is actually only in that upper section, the way we used to go to market. I can't grow we were expected to grow our business, by the way, at 30% compounded annually over the next 4 years. So for me to grow 15 times faster than the market, that's extremely difficult. You realize that's doubling your business every 3 years. So think about how many employees you have, whatever the number is. For us, it's 1,500. We have to go out and hire 1,500 people, basically, and grow our business in 3 years and double it. That's extremely difficult in the current market conditions in Japan, especially selling software. I can't do that in that space. It's just impossible. The only way I can do that is actually to try to penetrate down the custom application market. Now, fortunately for us, the packaged application market was actually moving in that direction anyway. So in Japan, the products that we sold, or the products that we sell, I should say, have to be sold into that custom application market. The SOA environment that I was telling you about, where you have legacy applications commingling with the packaged applications, actually lends itself very well to our strategy. So call it coincidence, call it dumb luck, call it whatever you want, but for us it actually was perfect in terms of a storm. So we had a perfect storm where our products were segmented, the applications themselves are now built on this enterprise software service-oriented architecture, and we had a strategy that we needed to penetrate in Japan. So for us, SAP, we actually found that our ability to execute on a 30% compounded annual growth rate is very high. I mean, probably more so than just about any other market in the world. So we saw ourselves as a huge potential, but with that comes a lot of challenges. So if you think about how big each of these industries are, look at the size of the bubble for banking, public sector. But if you look over here, what's the SAP penetration in the market? So you can see we have very low penetration, even though the markets themselves are fairly high. So we call these our strategic battleground areas. The growth industries for us are over here, where we have pretty decent penetration. And you can see high tech, for example, where we have a fairly sizable, attractive market, and SAP's penetration is very high. So most of our revenue today comes from the high-tech industry. And you can see consumer packaged goods, life sciences, engineering, construction, utilities, and waste. This is definitely our growth industries, or the areas that we're getting most of our revenue from. Obviously, you want to move everything over and up into this area, the quadrant over here, where you want to get SAP's penetration much higher in the market. These are our mature industries, where we have fairly small industries, but we have very high penetration. So in automotive, professional services, chemical, mill, those are okay, but it's not where we're getting the majority of our revenue from. So that's how we segment the market in those 4 categories. If I look at the Japanese market as a whole, as I said, the mission for our 2010 game plan is, how do I take that segmented market where I have large enterprise, etc., what are the key resources for growth? So if I think about where I'm going to grow my business in the business process platform and enterprise service-oriented architecture, who do I need to hire for that? Some of these I have to actually team up with some partners. Some of it I have to hire from the outside. I mean, there's a lot of key questions that you have to ask yourself, that you really have to be honest with yourself of where I'm going to grow, because if you make the wrong decision, the wrong bet, your investments go down the tubes, right? So you have to be really smart about the decisions that you're making. You also look at the future strategy and then how you can leverage existing and potential partners. I took out the customers and partner and competitors here, but you can see in the custom application market, there's a certain group of customers, competitors, and partners. In the core apps, you have the same thing. But the idea was that we did a survey where we looked at a total of 46 external interviews between customers, partners, and competitors. And we literally had a deep dive discussion. We went out to this third-party company. We didn't know who the companies are. So we had some of the information, but we actually were limited in the information we got back just out of the disclosure. So we had an NDA with a third-party company, so we had real good information. We just didn't know who it was. So the good news is that we got back some really key information that helped us understand what the dynamic of the market is. So if you go back to my discussion around the situation assessment, now I've got a really good understanding of what the market conditions are. This again just tells you about Japan in general as a summary, industries, the foreign investments that are going on, globalization that's occurring. Again, just some kind of key information. What this chart tells you is basically the custom application market in Japan for the large enterprise that are greater than 100 billion. You can see for the areas around no package user, $26 billion is actually, 26 billion yen I should say, is that part of the market where there's no package. So even in the large enterprise space, you can see about a third of the core apps, or 66% of the custom development space, including homegrown, is in that large enterprise market. So there's a huge potential in the space that we sell to, the large enterprise space, where there's still core custom applications that are being sold. So if I look at my 2010 game plan, I now know the Japanese market. So great, now what? What am I going to do? Well, if I think about the innovative growth strategies, now that I know and I have all this information, now I need to build a strategy, right? So I had my 2010 game plan where we are building our strategy by segment. So what are the growth areas? Again, for SAP, this is our corporate umbrella. So you can go to the website of SAP and get these same slides. Basically, on a 32 billion euro industry in 2005, in 2010 the estimate is 75 billion is our addressable market. What we want to do is actually expand the core application space over here to the left, which is more of that infrastructure play. So this is expanding into the custom application market, which again, if you think about who you're selling to, I mean, think about selling a widget. So you're going to go out and sell pens to somebody. If you're going to sell pens, you better know who the market is that's going to buy and acquire, the pen. So in some cases, people want blue pens, some people want red pens, some people actually would rather have a pencil. So maybe now you need widgets and gadgets that you're going to sell, and you need to manufacture those things. But you need to know who the market is. So is it mom and pops that are buying it, or just general consumers? Are you selling to businesses? So you have to segment your market. After you've segmented the market, you have to have different pricing, right? The pricing has to be associated with the people that are going to be buying them. If you're selling wholesale, you can have a different price strategy than if you're selling to a consumer, but now you got a different channel to the market. So I would argue that just no matter what industry or what segmented market you have to know that market intimate. And what we've done is actually expanding into that market that we don't know very well. We have to get a ton of information about that market. So if you think about custom applications, for us, it's kind of chartering, getting into uncharted territory for us. So we've done a ton of analysis on that whole market, looking at trends, why people develop applications in Japan, on their own versus using packaged applications. What is that dynamic? And the reality is most of the people develop applications in Japan on their own, these legacy or custom development, because they feel like their core competency is their process. And the reality is, if you sell pens, your core competency is not IT. If you sell bottled water, your core competency is not IT. But for some reason in Japan, a lot of people think, oh, my core competency is IT and selling water, or IT and selling pens. The reality is it's very difficult to differentiate yourself as a company based on the technology that you use. Now, in some cases, there's some differentiators. You offer your products over the web. You have online university versus doing it, in person. So there's a lot of technological advances. But the reality is, significant differentiators, probably not real high when it comes to IT. But you have to leverage IT in order to gain economies of scale. In other words, you have to utilize IT to manage your business, but it's not really your core competency. There's actually companies in Japan that will still custom build a general ledger. A general ledger has been around for 30 years from a software point of view. We actually started our company building general ledgers. So why companies in Japan would build a custom general ledger? There's no value in it. And besides, you're going to have 50 developers that are going to go out now and do it, but the difference is the Japanese companies, for the most part, will think, well, we're so different right? We're so different. We have to have our own general ledger. We can't use the general ledger that everybody else uses because we're different. The reality is the general ledger is the general ledger, right? I mean, thinking that you're going to go out and custom build something because you're different, just, it's hard for me to understand, but nevertheless, that's the world that we live in. So it's important to know the customers that you're selling to and why they made those decisions, and not whether or not it's rational, but what are you going to do to actually change the dynamic of that market? SAP is now expanding that addressable market, and what you'll see is, well, we still have our industry solutions and our business suite. The reality is we have to move into the business process platform, which is that enterprise service-oriented architecture. We have to expand in the SME segment, so we actually don't have as much revenue coming from an indirect or a channel like partners who are just reselling our software. We need to grow that part of our business. And then the business user. Basically, we have a lot of third-party applications like Adobe, we have mobile applications, desktop, etc. So all these applications built on top of the industry performance, so all of these industry-specific applications, the horizontal applications, so we built applications for a COO or a CFO or a CPO on procurement. So we have all these applications that are built specifically for roles. So we now have our marketing that's doing role-based or theme-driven marketing based on the respective role of the individual versus trying to build an application like financials. So now it's financials in the eyes of a CFO, financials in the eyes of an accounting officer, or supply chain management for a VP of supply chain, right? So you have to think about it in terms of the people and individuals who are going to be using it, and in a lot of cases, again, based on the specific market that you're in, you have to have XApps or analytics like dashboards, things like that are specific to the market. So these are called composite applications that actually sit on top of our core applications that are specific to that respective individual or role. So those are pretty key to us as well. Because now if I think about, okay, well I've got this custom application market I'm trying to penetrate, right? And I've got these composite applications that are really custom builds. I've got Japan who thinks that I need to build my own GL because that's what I do for a living. Well, maybe I can actually marry all those things up. Again, it's not trying to change the dynamic of the environment that you're in. It's how do I understand the dynamic and then make sure that the products that I build are meeting the needs of the respective market I'm serving versus trying to change the market itself. That takes years and it's almost impossible to do, but you can do it if you actually take the products that you have and make sure the messaging gets to the right people. From an embedded content, so how do I make sure that, again, supply chain, supplier relationship management, customer relationship management, all built on a platform. This is actually pulling information out of the system. So if you look at SAP, SAP recently acquired Business Objects. SAP did a really, really good job at entering data, right? So the human resource managers or the CFO or the financial analyst, they were all doing a really good job at entering in information, but the reporting that we had just really wasn't very good at all. So we acquired a Business Objects. Now that as a front end, if you're a manager, the information that you get is actually, the user interface is really, really cool now. So you now have a robust set of applications with a front end on our management reporting that allows you to get all the information out of the system based on how you manage your business, which is pretty critical. Let me talk a little bit about organizational change. So now that we've gone through SAP, our game plan, Japanese market, growth strategies, I thought it would be interesting to talk about Thomas Edison. He says, vision without execution is hallucination. So I thought that was interesting because the reality is it's true, right? I can have the best vision and strategy in the world, but if I can't execute, then it's just a hallucination. And I'm kind of kidding myself. So again, I go back to the days when I first started my MBA program. If I wanted to kid myself and say, man, I'm the best financial guy in the world, or I'm the best marketing guy, or I'm the best whatever I'm not, that's great, but it's just a hallucination. I'm not doing myself or anybody else a bit of good. What I really need to understand is, how do I actually fit into that world? One of the things that came out of our strategy was we built what we call the Customer Innovation Center. So in Japan, we had a group of product management people that interfaced back with Germany where we did our product development. We had a group of people that actually sat in multiple organizations. So we had some people in marketing, we had some people in alliances, we had some in our pre-sales organization.
These are the people that actually interfaced back with Germany to tell them what the market needs are. What are the market demands in Japan? How do I make sure that I build a product that's specific to this market? They existed all throughout SAP. And so what we did was we created a new organization called the Customer Innovation Center, where their job was to really interface exclusively with customers and our partners to understand what the market trends are, but do it in an organized way. In other words, it was literally, we didn't add any headcount. We just took 25 or 30 people and put them all into the same group. And so, okay, now you guys exist, and your job is to innovate, and based on what the needs are of the respective market that you're in, the industries, your job is to take that information and get it back to Germany as quickly as possible. And where we don't get that built into the roadmap, your job is to build custom applications on your own based on what Japan needs. So forgetting about whether if we can't build it in Germany, that's fine. We'll actually build it in Japan. But we have to make sure that that's one whole integrated process. We have to go through an evaluation phase, develop and test, we have to look at customers, etc. The reason that's important is because in the software business, you can't actually just go out and do a bunch of custom development like a lot of companies have done in Japan. We have to actually implement the software, we have to support it, we have to maintain it, we have to evolve it, right? It has to go and get better. So we can't just kind of operate in a vacuum. But what we do need to do is make sure we understand what the market needs and trends are, and then go out and develop the applications if they're not going to do it out of Germany. Otherwise, what we have is a bunch of upset customers who say, you guys just don't know who we are and what we need. Right? So that's why we've never been able to really penetrate into the custom app world, because we've never really listened to the customer. We've been hallucinating, thinking that we've got this great vision and strategy, but we've never been able to execute on it. The way it works is basically I have my partners, I have account executives or our sales guys, I have CEMs, these are the people that are salespeople within SAP that sell the implementation services, and then I have our user group. So between customers, the people that implement and sell, the account executives, and our partners, we have a pretty good idea of what's needed in the market. Between our Industry Solutions group, they interface directly with the Customer Innovation Center. And what they do is they basically decide at that point, do I need to build something or do I need to integrate it? Because I have a lot of third-party applications like the software companies, Adobe, etc., that have their own set of products, so third-party solutions. Or I can actually go in and I can do some custom development within SAP Japan. And we have a whole process around that to make sure that we have the right support strategy, the right implementation strategy, etc. So those are pretty key elements. Once you develop it one-off, so if I develop one application for Japan, there may be other manufacturers similar to the company I've sold to that needs it in other parts of the world. As that kind of grows, that becomes more of this ACS solution, which is more of a custom solution that's been repeatedly built for other parts of the market. And then that leads to a go-to-market for our CIC. But this is now based on our 2010 game plan, based on the transformational needs of the business, the growth that we need in our custom development space. The CIC actually is now a pretty integral part of Japan now, and it literally just started in December. So it went from cradle or inception to coming to fruition or execution in about 7 months. So by any terms of a sizable business like SAP, to have the concept, to grow it into an organizational structure and begin executing on it in about 6 or 7 months is pretty significant. It's a very difficult thing to do, in the environment that we're in. We're actually now exporting that. So I'm talking to people in Latin America and all throughout Asia Pacific because they like the idea. The idea of the CIC, by the way, is not only to integrate and build these other third-party applications and to be that product management team or the liaison back into Germany, but they're actually, again, working with customers to make sure we innovate based on what the needs are of the market. So it was a pretty critical find to create the organization. So let me talk about where we are today. As I said, SAP has these collaborative business networks. We're side by side with loosely coupled applications. So we have some of our applications that are on demand, as I said, where we have enterprise ESO by demand, or we have by evolution, or the core applications. And then you have the other core applications where they're tightly integrated side by side. That's kind of starting next year. So our business by design that I was talking about earlier, that is the service-oriented architecture and software as a service. We have service-oriented architecture today. The business by design, or the mid-market solution for the companies between 50 and 250 employees, those are coming out actually early next year for the Japanese market. We've got it in English in other parts of the world, but it's just not here yet. So the idea is if you're going to optimize your product delivery or to drive the top line revenue, you have to have clear governance and portfolio planning. So what the right product for the right customer for the right market. You have to be able to drive excellence programs. So you have to have established customer satisfaction. We actually created a customer satisfaction office in Japan. Who now just focuses, literally it's just a small team of people, but all they do is go out and work closely with customers to make sure that they're happy. They go out and do, we have obviously third-party companies that do customer sat studies. We've been doing that for, 20 years. But these people are actually taking the customer sat studies that come back that are negative and going out and meeting with the customers to find out why they're not happy and what we can do to actually change that. And literally they have, carte blanche authority to come back to SAP and provide feedback. And now we have a mechanism for closed loop to get back to the customers to say, we heard what you said, we heard why you're upset, this is what we're doing to change it, this is when you can expect that change, and they have that continued closed loop feedback. So as far as Moore's Law, we wish we had it for the software industry rather than just for the microprocessor industry. But for us, we need to go from coding to modeling. In other words, rather than just doing out a bunch of custom code, we actually need to model the software based on what the future needs are. We need to do it and have an abstraction layer to embrace the latest technological innovation. So again, innovation is where it's at for SAP. We have to be able to evolve our business and innovate. And then finally, we have to go in and look at our internal and external uses of the enterprise service-oriented architecture. Okay, so again, going back to the vision without execution is hallucination. For us, execution matters. We already have the right strategy. We know now that I've built all of that over the last 6 to 12 months. You have the right strategy. You got the right structure in place, and I've got the right organizational structure. But the next 12 months, basically on the execution piece, is what's critical to us. So we've got to make sure that we have the right product quality. We're ready for more suites. Our business process platform is now making money. So it's all about the revenue that we can generate. And we have to have our volume business, meaning selling, for us, volume business means selling through our channel, where we have an indirect model. So it's extremely expensive to have a bunch of direct sales guys, but to do it through our channels, obviously it's less expensive, and I can penetrate the market a lot faster. So we need to be able to get out and focus on customers and users. But while we're the leaders, the race is not over. So for SAP, we see a huge horizon for us, a great opportunity in Japan. Okay.
Okay, well, that's a great point to finish on.